Hi,
Good morning.
good morning.
Oh, I've got some interesting stuff going on up here.
I was about to comment on it, but
Yay. Oh. Well,
bed hair.
well, it's showered and everything. It's not,
It looks clean and probably smells good.
yeah. Oh, how's it going, Flemming?
Pretty well. I don't know. This week is not very good, but otherwise it's fine.
How
Yes.
come? What happened?
Nothing particular. It's just one of those weeks where everything is a problem. Everything sort of stacks up, and suddenly a lot of unexpected bills show up, and everything is just a little difficult.
Ah,
So, or everything is sort of an unsolvable problem. And I guess I've learned in the past to just not try to
solve everything?
solve problems that are unsolvable. Or well, sort of sometimes you just need to sit it out a little bit. I mean, if you just sort of suffer through it, then suddenly things change a little later. So things that appear to be unsolvable problems next week, they're probably not.
Yes.
But right now they are, and I can't see my way out of them. But from experience, that tends to change.
Yes. Nice to see you, Flemming.
Nice to see you too.
Hey, look at
Okay.
that shirt. That's a really cool color line.
Well, I don't know if it's my style. It's sort of like a shabby looking, like you have two sort of torn T-shirts on top of each other kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's from some dance event. It's supposed to look like that, like you're just threw a couple of random T-shirts over your muscular body. I don't know. I don't know what kind of body it fits with. Yeah, if I have like big bulging muscles, it maybe works well.
So maybe we can start today, Fleming, by just diving into our intentions.
Yeah, so I have several things that might be interesting. So yeah, let's just do that. Let's see where that goes.
Great.
Hmm.
Mhm.
Hmm. Well, I'll start because you probably have something you can just sort of rattle off right away. I don't know if you do. No,
Maybe
I'm
I
sorry. I'm like,
absolutely. I'm sure I do. I'm just
I don't know. You often seem to have sort of it all ready, have your questions ready and stuff. So I imagined you could just sort of say exactly what your intentions are.
yeah,
Maybe. So that's why I'll start.
great.
Hmm. Well, I don't necessarily always know what my intentions are before they sort of respond to something, before they run into something. So I have trouble just sort of saying that here's a list of my intentions, or here's a list of this is what I am, this is what I do. It always seems fake if I do
Yes.
that. And at the same time, I always try to have sort of something sort of ready, but it's never quite right because it gets defined based on what I run into. So,
Yes.
so sometimes I can see it in retrospect. Um, so my intentions are sort of in the direction of something with people and networks, helping people either transform their lives or get it together as groups, and in the direction of helping things emerge.
Yes.
Things being that sort of mysterious intelligence that seems to be built into everything and that might emerge if you sort of let it. So it's sort of helping that or orchestrating that. So some of my intentions are sort of in the direction of magic, we could call it, like allowing things to happen in ways that are not immediately obvious. So playing with the multidimensional field around us so somehow having some kind of sense of that or having tools for that or just putting attention on that and doing that either with individuals or with groups or with networks somehow.
Mm.
And I'm doing that, but I have maybe an urge to maybe have something more structured or formal to do. In part, sort of noticing that typically it doesn't align directly with what I'm being paid for doing in the world. Ideally, that should be my living to do something like that, and usually it isn't. Like in periods of time, I've had a career and a living as a therapist, being paid for seeing individuals and them paying me money for helping them change their lives. So I could do that, but I have sort of an urge to maybe do that at another level, which requires thinking of how to package things, how to sell things, which I don't always find very easy, or that doesn't flow very well for me. But knowing a bit of like internet marketing and how to structure things in order to get people interested, there really does need for me to be a bit of a structure around it, like a typical structure. Like in internet marketing, that's a little crass, but one would call it a funnel. Like if you want to sell something to people, you ideally need a lot of people who are a little bit interested, who like you or who read your blogs or something like that. So if you have thousands of people paying some kind of attention to you, and then a small amount of people who maybe are really interested, that form some kind of community. Doesn't mean they buy anything, but they're a little more hardcore, or they do something with it. And if you have that, then maybe a smaller number of people would be willing to pay you for something significant, like going on a retreat or a workshop or some kind of thing like that. And it's a funnel in internet marketing because you sort of suck in all these people and lead them to your high-priced products. But a more pleasant way of saying it is that, well, it tends to be how things work. I mean, I might know thousands of people who think I'm a nice guy, but that doesn't mean they are gonna go to a retreat with me or something, or they're gonna show up and pay me for changing their lives or something like that. So, but the small number will. So it's kind of like to run into the right people to work intensively with. It might make sense to have a larger number of people you sort of you know. So I both say that, and I also find it a little distasteful to even think about that. But I'm thinking that I probably should work in the direction of having a little bit more structured thing around what does Flemming do, and how does one participate in that. Not that there's anything wrong with the things I do, but sometimes things stay smaller if you don't sort of think big with them, if you don't sort of somehow fit them into a bigger game kind of thing. So that's some of what I'm thinking about right now. And otherwise, in other ways, I'm relatively happy having intentions that are somewhat mysterious and vague, and I like having intentions that I can not just rattle off, that I might try in many different ways, but I sense what they are, so I don't need to like put them necessarily on a business card or something. So I'm perfectly happy being sort of a mysterious something wizard.
And you do that well.
Thank you. So since I feel I need something kind of thing. Somewhere there's like should be some income stream connected with that or something.
Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, that's something. Now, how about you say something?
Yeah. I'll just also plant the seed that I'm really curious about your beginning journey, and some of the
Yes.
bigger pieces that you've done.
Yes.
And so we can go there now.
Yes, we can do that. So I don't want to take all the time for me, but that would certainly make sense, particularly in the thread of stories, like how does that fit in for me? Um, like some of it is fairly random. Like I just responded to something along the way. Like the reason for even considering myself being in the field of like I've been a coach and a therapist kind of thing. Like why is that? That's not something I particularly chose. It just sort of appeared along the way, kind of thing. When I was in my early 20s, I was a Scientologist, which was my first spiritual awakening. But in Scientology, is very sort of intellectual, so it's spiritual in sort of a figuring out how the universe works kind of way, which suited me quite well at the time. That's sort of what I needed. I didn't know what else spiritual awakening would be, but for me it would be sort of, oh, why there's this stuff can sort of make sense. You could understand it, like the universe. There's some way of relating to it. So somehow that woke up something in me, even though I sort of was dragged into it in a sense. But part of what Scientology is, or the core practice in it, is essentially a therapy. It's that you see a counselor who helps you work through your issues and your past and so forth in a particular way, which is not half bad. I wouldn't use it exactly like that, but a lot of what I do is initially shaped and colored by that, and then I've processed it myself and worked out what works for me, and I've learned other things since then. But at that time, I was essentially trained in being a Scientology auditor, is what it's called. Very thoroughly. So, I mean, that's years of training and practice in doing that, and working with thousands of hours with people on doing whatever that is. So, and after that sort of process, and also extracting myself from that and sorting out what actually works of that, or what's more universal and what isn't, what was just the things that work when you've read the colorful brochures and so forth, which was interesting. So like I got kicked out of Scientology in '82.
Uh-oh.
Declared a suppressive person, which means you get excommunicated, and you get sort of a certificate of being clinically evil, essentially. Oh. Like, well, that's often how it's done. Like,
it's quite a judgment, isn't it?
That's quite a judgment, yeah. Well, it's not totally wrong, but it's no, I'm not about me. I mean, but the principle, that the idea in it is that, I mean, in a general population, most people are nice, good people who try to make things work. But there would be a very small percentage who don't, and that's what Scientology would call suppressives. That's like people who are like sociopaths or something like that. So maybe we have a couple of % of the population that they're not just nice people. If they get a chance, they're going to screw you over and keep you down and hide your body in the basement, where most people don't do that. So anyway, so it's not totally wrong. I mean, I do believe people are good people, but some people you've got to dig a little bit deeper, and mostly I don't deal with people like that. But anyways, in Scientology, that was what it was called, a suppressive person. So there's some awareness of, if things go wrong in some place, that maybe there's somebody like that around, and maybe if we find that person and get rid of them, everything will be better, kind of thing. But that ended up sort of just being used as sort of an excuse for getting rid of people who just sort of rocked the boat, or somebody didn't like them or something like that. So so it's an excuse for getting rid of people. So anyway, it's a long story, but there was a big upheaval in the Scientology organization at that time, 81, 82. Hubbard had sort of disappeared and possibly died already, although officially he died a few years later. But anyway, he was hidden away somewhere and was no longer sort of available. So some young kid who was one of his messengers took over control of the organization. He's the guy who still runs it today. Um, and so, but that resulted in sort of getting rid of everybody who was at least a little bit of trouble. So I was a very small fish, but I was at least a little bit of trouble.
Okay.
So there's lots of stories in that, but anyways, that was just to explain why I was a therapist. I mean, that made me a Scientology auditor. That's not what I wouldn't consider myself a therapist at that time, but I still thought it was kind of a good thing, and there was sort of a rebellion of the people who got kicked out of Scientology, who then thought, well, we could still use those techniques, but screw that organization. So we're just going to like do it for ourselves and charge less money and like do it sort of in a more normal way. And so I was part of the sort of rebellion movement for a while. And at some point I got tired of that too. But anyway, part of it was that I tried in sort of the regular world to figure out how can I do this kind of thing. Like some people would come and pay me for my services, and I would like do this auditing kind of thing. And I can't quite call it the same thing because the Church of Scientology are very sort of down on any kind of competition. But anyway, so at that point, I was in Scientology in Denmark, but then I had moved in 1985 to California with my wife and my little daughter, and I set up a practice to be, I called it a clearing practitioner at that point.
That's a neat way to frame it.
Yeah, so clearing is a Scientology word, but it's also a word that's sort of generally understood and easily communicates what it's trying to say. Clearing, who wouldn't want some clearing? That sounds good. But if you knew something about Scientology, you could recognize maybe it has something to do with that. So it could cover both sorts of people. And one clientele was people who had been in Scientology, who were used to, like, you paid thousands of dollars for this kind of stuff, and now I can do it for less money than they would get it otherwise. So there was this kind of customers where I could do exactly the same thing. They knew what it was, they knew they wanted it, and whatever I charged for it was terribly cheap. So I did that, but also I was more trying to position myself to work with sort of normal people. And then that resulted in an evolution of both processing everything I had learned with Scientology and learning some other things. I got trained in NLP, hypnosis, a few different other things, and I realized, well, there's really lots of cool things one can do.
Yes.
And I sort of rethunk what I thought I knew, which was a very interesting and also very productive period. I wrote several books full of essays and experiences and records of doing that, which were at that time quite popular for a certain type of people. I don't make them public any longer, but because they were part of sort of my reprocessing the Scientology philosophy and technology. Anyway, so result was that I worked on, well, how, if somebody comes to see me, they respond to an ad of what do I do with them? And I realized a bunch of the things I had learned in Scientology didn't just work with just anybody, but some of them did. And other things did too, like a lot of the NLP stuff, you can use that on anybody, and it's very simple, result-oriented techniques where you can sort of reframe and rework how you think about things, and then things are a little different. So they were things I could do with somebody, a stranger who came in for an hour, and we worked on their problems, and they walked away, and they were different. So I reorganized things, and I became very good at getting good results with that, and I stopped caring about any of the Scientology people who are sort of tended to be more trouble anyway, or have sort of a little bit unrealistic ideas of what they would get from it. So I started enjoying much better working with just whoever showed up. And one of my greatest joys in that is somebody who shows up and sits down in front of me in any format, and we find just one little sort of key thing that changes their orientation in life. Like they wake up to something, they realize, oh, actually it has something to do with me. I can just have a different life. I can just that tiny little moment when somebody discovers, when they sort of wake up or realize it has, their life has something to do with them. If I
Yes.
could do nothing else, I would just want to do that all the time. Like anything I can do with people where I help them sort of find that awareness within themselves, that, oh, um, and so I discovered that at that point, and I liked doing that with many people, and that became sort of a practice which I pursued for a few years. So on and off, I've done that since then, but not very much really at this point. Oh, I wrote a couple of other books about uh, my techniques, essentially what ended up being the collection of techniques I used.
Yeah.
In the meantime, I changed the name again, since clearing practitioner still sounded a little too much like Scientology, so it ended up being calling it being a facilitator or process facilitator. um, and I wrote a couple of training manuals in how to do everything I did at that time, and they became quite popular also. They were translated into Russian and published as hardcover books in Russia,
Mm-hmm.
which created in relatively large, well, 40,000 copies or something. But the result became that a lot of Russian therapists suddenly were using my techniques as part of their practice, which was interesting. But still, most of that sort of fizzled out a bit. Like I was mostly driven by when I sort of got into new things and I learned new things, and I sort of enjoyed doing it better. So over the years, I sort of uh, fell a little bit out of the habit, or I didn't expand that. I thought maybe I could have moved on to then training lots of other people and doing workshops and things like that, but I didn't particularly, in part because I didn't organize it. So I ended up just sort of giving away my materials online. You can just sort of download it for free, and a lot of people think that's nice, but that doesn't particularly create a movement or anything around it. So it's still there, and I'm both happy with that, but also sort of feeling I maybe should do something else or go further with that, or do something similar with groups of people or something. So anyway, so that's how I got started with wanting to do something with individuals. With groups of people, it also became sort of sort of various random things I responded to. I accidentally sort of started a movement in uh, in '95, the New Civilization Network, which in principle I launched that, but it was
Flemming.
really.
I accidentally started a movement. I love you.
Well, that's kind of how it worked, and I would like to accidentally start some more movements. But I mean, it has happened a bunch of times that I end up getting a lot of credit for having started something that really I just sort of did the appropriate thing at the time. So like it's like that particular thing, it came out of a mailing list discussion group I had started also, which was called the Whole Systems mailing list. And I didn't know what Whole Systems was, but somebody mentioned it somewhere, and I thought, Whole System, that sounds really good. I'd like to
Yes.
be into that. So I started a discussion group for that, for Whole Systems, and I thought it was maybe a new word or something, but it actually did have some history. So me creating a meeting point for that, which is something I've done several times too. But if I don't really know something, but I'm attracted to it, I just sort of make a space for it. And then the actual people who are experts in that, they show up and talk about it, and pretty soon something grows from that. And And often they will credit me for being the great starter of that, even though I really just was curious about what that might be. So anyway, so that became very busy, interesting place for systems thinkers of various kinds. And at some point, it felt like that group sort of wanted to move more into action somehow, like not just talk about things, but do something. And I wrote posts on that mailing list about maybe we should like think about taking action kind of thing. And I must have used the word new civilization somewhere. Well, I just meant the idea that there would be a network of people sort of systems oriented working on making the world a better place kind of thing. But apparently I wrote that particular post so well, so it looked like I asked people to join this movement kind of thing. So and lots of people joined right away. So right of same day, there were like 100 people said, "Yeah, we're in. Let's do it. Let's do this." Um, and I didn't necessarily think of it that way. But I would often think of, okay, well, how can I help that? I'll provide some facilities for that. I'll make a chat room or another mailing list or something. I mean, there wasn't very much one could do at that time, but I created some forums for that, and people kept showing up and thought that was just wonderful. We're in. And lots of very smart people with visions and ideas and resources and organizations. And so that quickly grew to hundreds of people. And we started sort of working on, well, what do we actually do? Like having deciding what to call things and how to organize it, and what kind of things would a network like this do. And some of those things were wonderful and seemed very promising, and lots of people were very excited about it. And I started putting some resources in place, which gradually became an online social network with forums and chat rooms and work groups of different kinds. And lots of these people were very hopeful about this, and it grew to thousands of people. And I was also a little puzzled about it. I didn't mean to like start and be the leader of a movement necessarily. I just meant to give this some space or help it happen.
Yeah.
And it clearly felt like it needed to be something self-organizing, that people do what they want to do and they just go with it, and they let other people know what they're doing, and we just loosely connect those pieces. There's not a hierarchy, nobody's in charge. Whatever you want to do, if you're inspired to do it, find some other people to do it with and run with it and let us know. And some people did that, but also to some degree, certain number of them were sort of looking to me towards, okay, we're all here. What do you think?
All right, leader.
We're ready. Just tell us what to do. And I'm like, and each time I would explain, I would like, no, that's not what it is. This is what it is. It's like you have something. You get inspired in any way that works for you for what you want to do, and I'll help it happen. I'll help you have places to announce it and to work on it and meet other people. So it became sort of a bit of an ongoing cycle of, yeah, we're ready. And I'm like, no, you're the people who need to do it. So just I'll help you announce it or something. I'll talk about it. I'll philosophize about it. I'll give a bit of background. I'll connect the pieces for you. I'm at your service, but I'm not going to tell you what to do. So that became both, a lot of people got that, but also a lot of people didn't really. So it became sort of a mixture of, oh, nothing is going to happen here. I mean, we'll just a lot of, and some people started arguing, and some people didn't agree with each other. And I am good at conflict resolution, but I can't solve everybody's problems with each other.
Yeah,
and part of the problem was that some of the first people to show up were great visionaries that were very inspiring, but that didn't necessarily get along with each other.
Right.
I mean, it was people like Jacques Fresco of the Venus Project or the Zeitgeist project, amazingly visionary architect designing future cities. But if you don't agree with the way his cities look, then it just doesn't work. I mean, if I don't want to live in a round building in a round city that's organized optimally, efficiently the way he wants it to be organized, then there's just no room for me. So anyway, there are some people like that were inspiring by themselves, had written books that had followings, but when I put them in a room together, they just got into a fight. And so it was in part that there were too many visionaries and not enough just doers.
Yes.
And in part that the visionaries were maybe visionary about some parts, but not particularly about how humans self-organize and work together, kind of thing.
Yes.
So there was a great experience with a lot of promise that for a few years it was really happening, and I was playing the role simply of highlighting the good things that were going on. So I would do regular newsletters with, well, here are some of the projects people are working on, and these people doing this, these people are doing that, it's going well, these people have that problem, anybody who can help, and helping people share their visions of where that would go. And just the thing of seeing the new people who showed up to join was very inspiring. Just every month, a list of the people who showed up is very interesting. And I found that in other aspects, like simply saying hello and hearing what people bring is very fascinating.
Flemming, I just want to let you know that I've been like teary for several minutes.
So I'm just like, I noticed, I'm just sort of ignoring it. I didn't know what to do.
No, I know. It's just really beautiful to hear and to be able to follow your story. And yeah, it's just really beautiful. So I know that you can probably tell, but I just wanted to, it's very moving.
Yes, I could tell. So I didn't know. Maybe I didn't need to do anything about that. I don't, but thank you. So it's moving, and it also brings up the various problems with it. Like, so I accidentally started this movement, and I didn't necessarily know how to make it like turn into the whole planet or something, and which is maybe good because there are unsolved problems and there are lots of details to work out. But that is, for example, one reason I'm now more interested in focusing on sort of the rather small stuff of how do a group of people hang out together, even though we come from different places and we're different, want different things to some degree. How do we even do being together, kind of thing? So that was missing at that point. I mean, everybody were going straight to, this is what we should do, this is what I want, and they didn't have a way of like really just being present or finding the we in it. And also that I was good at providing sort of a vision that lots of people joined. Like, it's a little vague but still clear in the important ways, like that what's a new civilization. I mean, what the hell is that? That's but it sounds good. So if you have any kind of inkling or intention to make the world a better place in your own way, that makes sense. And so part of what went wrong a little bit was it attracted people who really totally didn't want to be in the same room, even like for example, one thing that came up once in a while, like some of the people were like scientifically oriented, like more materialistic oriented people who were scientists who were working on solving some important problems, and academic researchers, and who are very important, doing something that needs to be done, but who totally don't want to be in the same network as like astrologers and channelers and all sorts of other people. So they're like, so if we give sort of a mix of, here's some of the people that are there, and the scientist guys will, astrology, you cannot have astrology, that's not going to work for, like, I mean, we're into scientific rigor, and that's totally unproven new age pseudoscience. That doesn't work. So some of those people just left just because there were other people there who were like new age people. the New Age people are perfectly fine with science, but don't always know how to like talk about it respectfully. That works in a way for the scientists. So the scientists thought that these people are crazy. That's not going to work.
Right.
So some of that kind of things happen, that the people who actually were the doers in some area, they got turned off by the too fluffy bunny other people who are like a little too ungrounded about actually doing certain things. So
Right.
and I didn't have a magical way of making them all sort of coexist. um, so what was I saying? It was
And
going somewhere.
when did that mailing list accidental birthing of a movement happen?
Early 95.
Okay.
So that mailing list had existed for a little over a year, since 1994. 1995, that turned into the New Civilization Network. And over the next 4 or 5 years, that was going rather strongly. Uh, so that had a lot of action online. And there were also some more in-person aspects of it. Like, for example, I organized New Civilization salons in Los Angeles, which were like, it was just the idea of inviting. It's a similar invitation as the one for the New Civilization Network, which is for calling all like inventors, healers, explorers, artists, doers, builders, like a mix of people who are like doing stuff, who are in some inspired fashion, but from different fields. And I really totally enjoy seeing people come together who wouldn't have chosen it otherwise, and seeing it work.
Mhm.
So I like that. I love that sort of mix of these people running into each other, and then it's sort of something intertwines between them. So essentially, I thought at first that the New Civilization Salon would be some kind of sort of discussion of some kind, like a salon in the French way is sort of where intellectual philosophers get together and have some evolved conversation about things. I thought it would be like that, but very quickly too many people showed up for that. I mean, the very first one, there were 30 people.
Wow.
One could have a conversation between them, but mostly it became sort of a party where just people introducing themselves, who they are, became a key piece. So just going around the room, hearing "Who are you?" for a minute. From then on, that was fascinating every time. So, and then whatever wants to happen afterwards. So
Mhm.
it grew from 30 people. That was the least there had been, to 50, 100, 150 people showing up every time. So obviously it needs somebody's big. It was a different place each time. So somebody's house or whatever we could think of. And typically it was a circle of who's here today, and uh, which was always mind blowing. Like some people found it intimidating. We go out the room, around the room, and everybody's like, "Well, I just came back from 15 years in the Amazon, where I studied magical plants," or this other one. I'm just like, I have this project. I'm exporting uh, 50,000 teddy bears to Bosnia because for children in the war. And the next one is, well, I've built this model of I mean, everybody was like doing something, or they had something, very different kinds of things, but they had a spark or something. So it was sort of a show and tell of who people were. And then we just spontaneously made a program out of that. Either we just sort of networked and had a party, or usually there would be some somebody could sing or do belly dancing, or they had something they could do, and we ended up drumming around a fire or something. And so just watching that whole room or whatever it is buzzing with people connecting was a great joy. And that became sort of a connecting fabric for a certain uh, for some subcultures in Los Angeles that connected together through that. And I still often hear people fondly mention it, like many years later. So anyway, so the idea of bringing people together who are somehow cultural creatives in some sense, or doing some part, and then just mixing them together and seeing what happens. I enjoy that a lot. So that happened for a number of years. Um, and also, I ended up having a location sort of related to that. There was a period of time which um, Letitia was there. So we often fondly refer to it as the synchronicity vortex, which was a certain period of time around there.
When?
Uh,
When?
so it was around 90s, 97, 98, 99, around there. Um, and uh, there was stuff happening around me and also around my friend Julie. And Letitia was mostly had sort of a supporting role of being very good at sort of being anchored and being present with things. Uh, but there are various things that came together. We ended up having a building on Venice Boardwalk. There was this artist who was one of the people who came to my New Civilization salons, and he had somehow struck it rich with some business deal in the past, and he had this building on the beach, and he didn't really know what to do with it. So he asked if we maybe would like to make some kind of community center, or you also want to make an artist gallery. So we made that an artist gallery and community center. We
Mm.
called it the Global Solutions Center. Essentially, he offered us this building for free. We just stayed there and did whatever we wanted. And somebody else had a. It was a time when an internet connection was very expensive, but somebody else was owed a favor from the local internet provider. So they put a thick T1 line pipe into the building, and we set up a lot of servers, made a lot of things happen. And always, all of it was sort of a gift economy.
Yes.
That I didn't have any money. I was actually in all sorts of financial trouble at the time, and months behind on the rent. But I threw all of my energy into just this sort of new civilization networking, and the universe responded well by suddenly making a building and internet servers, and lots of people show up, and so we had lots of events and things going on. And the synchronicity vortex part, it was mostly like me and Julie, um, mostly just sat around on the couches in that space and sort of thought up interesting things. Then people would walk by. Uh, this was on the beach, so some people just walked by randomly, or somebody brought along somebody else, or somebody had heard about something we did. So one thing weirder and more interesting than the other just walked by. So we just sort of sat there and strategized or synthesized whatever showed up, and interesting people would show up, and interesting things would happen based on that, all by itself, for a few years, where everything was sort of uh, floated on sort of a gift economy, self-organizing, coming together by itself kind of thing. And I did various events out of that space. Sometimes the salon, sometimes there were little weekly groups where I forgot what I called it, but anybody who had a project of some kind, something they wanted to happen, each time we concentrate on one person. So if somebody shows up, whatever it is they want to do, the rest of us just help them make that happen. Ideas, input, brainstorm, help do it, that kind of thing. Uh, and Julie had some events called the Lights of the Round Table or something like that. Anyway, so that brought together a lot of the spiritual community, or the goddess community of Los Angeles. Various things sort of came together and intertwined. Um, anyway, so that lasted for a few years. Eventually, that fizzled out also. Um, but anyway, so lots of experiences connecting both this sort of self-organizing movement with a physical part, an online part, and so forth. So this was a period of time where, yeah, I mean, I still fondly look back to it as some things, or as a model for how things can happen, at the same time as a model of also as some examples of where it didn't work out. Uh, but I mean, some part. I mean, there are many stories involved, and some of them are completely outrageous, like the like running into sources of funding in the billions of dollars that sort of almost happened at that time. So lots of things sort of intertwined and sort of almost happened.
Yeah.
Well, some things did happen, but other things almost. But a lot of it is sort of my reference point on things that work and can work, and sort of the power of somehow, if you mix the ingredients right, then suddenly flow just sort of happens. One thing just flows to the next, and a lot of it is about not making a master plan that's logically and rationally worked out, but it's just sort of getting out of the way and being present, holding it,
Yeah.
Considering it possible, and allowing it, noticing it when it shows up, and
Mm-hmm.
allowing it to happen. So um, I guess after that, I somehow went back to being sort of more of a normal person with a more down-to-earth life kind of thing, which I have
Mm.
which I have mixed feelings about.
And when did that transition to normal life happen?
Well, I moved to France in 2003. Um, so it was in part there, or even before, like the New Civilization Network sort of fizzled out. I've mostly made a living from various computer projects. Sometimes worked well, but most of the time was a bit of a struggle. At some point, it felt right to move back to Europe. 2003, moved to France, and I had in mind that maybe that would open some doors to, like, for example, I mean, there were all these people in Russia who had read my manuals and stuff. I thought maybe that would be likely. I would probably be traveling around doing workshops or something like that, but none of that happened.
Mm.
So instead, and I was surprised too. I mean, France it's a very pleasant place to live, but at the same time, it's completely different. People here are very different from the kind of network I had in Los Angeles. Uh, I mean, totally. I mean, people here are just mainly sort of going to work, and um, then enjoying not being at work. And I mean, it's not the kind of people that necessarily that have great plans or aspirations in life. I mean, their aspirations are mostly sort of to get off of work so that they can, like, have a good time and go to
Yeah.
work again tomorrow, or get a good education or something, and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
bring up kids, and all of it is fine. But it's not. I don't have this network of world changers I had in Los Angeles. I still have it online, but I'm physically a little bit sort of out of touch with that. So this has been a little bit more of an exercise in both being nobody, that I went to France and nobody knew who I was. So it's more like sort of being normal and living somewhere and seeing what I can do for a living, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that has sort of continued until now. Um, doesn't mean I feel wrong about being here, but I'm puzzled about the sort of not physically having the network of people around me I did before, and
Yeah.
what to do about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, and maybe thinking that means I need to activate people here a different way, which is one possibility. I mean, whenever I mention something like my New Civilization salons to the people I meet here, they're like, well, yeah, you should do that. Of course, totally. I mean, we French people really need that. We just need a bit of a push. And so people here are more sort of closet spiritual people, where on the surface they're sort of very skeptical, intellectual kind of thing, but still everybody wants to experience life a little deeper, of course. So there's there are opportunities, but I haven't particularly done anything about it. And I don't necessarily have to do anything here either. Most of what I do for work, for money, is not in France. It's out of the country anyway. So if it's on the internet, it doesn't really matter where I am.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
So Flemming, I'm just curious. Um, could I take a 5-minute break and we come right back?
Yes.
What's the timing?
Yes, no problem.
Okay, I'll just be a sec.
I'll get a cup of tea.
So we're back. Flemming, thank you. When we talked about um, the human design, I had some good realizations in that I sometimes need a moment to process. And also, there's the bio break.
But yeah, that also, it connects well with my, like when I say I accidentally start a movement or something, like what generally works for me is not me deciding to do something, but it's me responding to an obvious need that's there, like there's a call for something, and that's the things that tend to flow for me, some kind of response. And for me, that's usually instant. It's sort of like it's an obvious, this is what, there's a yes there, and then the rest is details.
Yes.
Yeah. So that also means I'm a bit lost if there's nothing to respond to.
Right.
Like, yeah, it can be frustrating just sort of waiting for the next thing.
Yes.
But sometimes it's the right thing to do.
So when in kind of doing this process of learning about each other, for me, it's really powerful because it's through our stories that we get to really understand. So for me, it's been really, really beautiful and gratifying to really go deeper into your journey. And I guess my last question is, what now for you? I mean, obviously there's responding to what's presenting, but what are your intuitions around what now?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I can answer that. Again, my intuition comes when there's something to respond to, but but some things need to happen in one of these areas here.
Yes.
And also, I mean, I'm in a way comfortable with and a proponent of non-linear change. Like, I mean, things usually don't happen nicely in order.
Yes.
Based on your carefully constructed and executed plan. So it's also an ongoing thing for me, is how to relate to that, how to, in a useful way, relate to a universe that isn't really at all as linear as we would like it to be. I mean, things just sort of show up and happen, and based on how we respond to them, other things happen. So it doesn't mean we can't be conscious about it, but it's a little tricky how to do that in some coherent manner. And I feel I'm constantly learning that, possibly, hopefully, also gathering some tools or some wisdom about that. But certainly personally, I'm learning how to surf the unknown continuously, and maybe sense a little bit of what's next.
Yes.
But at this point, it's rather tricky. I mean, the whole world situation is really sort of unstable and unpredictable. So I certainly don't see any clear thing of where this is all going. I can certainly sense that, like the work we do in a group with conversation, sort of sensing what's next and what's there for us and for each of us, that's There's no doubt that that's valuable, and that's a component in whatever we're making out of that.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah. And in terms of our process today, for me, it's really powerful to be able to go deeper and to create that space and to experience what it is to listen and follow, and also then what is my response, right?
yeah, and also, well, we've mostly talked about me. We should do the same with you, but maybe we should do another session for
Yes.
that or something. Um, so we can keep talking about me. So, but we need a response, like for it to be weaving. Yeah, a response from you would be good. And plus, I mean, I get driven by something to respond to. Like one of the most constructive or useful things for me is simply good questions. Like I love answering or responding to questions, and that's sometimes all I need in order to for something to fall into place. If,
Yes.
if nobody asks the question, I'm not going to answer it, but maybe I have the answer if the question is there, kind of thing.
Yes. Yes. A few months ago, I think around the time I joined the conversation experiments, I had a conversation with John Keldon. And one of the things that I was, looking to do and model at that time is, how do you meet someone and exchange what you have in an hour? And so that I was attempting to do that with John Keldon, but of course he has such a rich diversity of experience, and he's fascinating. And by the end of the hour, we'd only scratched the surface.
And he talks a lot, so yeah, with it, and it can be hard. You can't expect the person necessarily to do it. Like John is all over the place. It's all very interesting, but he has lots of pieces, and you didn't really get his story necessarily, I'm sure. So I mean, but so how does one get actually the key parts? Well, or the story. Like here, like what we've been doing here, I've told some stories about me. I've maybe mentioned in other places, but getting more meat on it is probably useful.
Yes.
Um, then most people don't start there. They would probably more start with like sort of promoting their current project or something, or will accidentally sort of go all over the place. I mean, we're excited about what we do. It's hard not to go in a zillion different directions, and at the end of an hour, we're not really sure what we have.
So what I learned in the conversation with John Keldon, and was that, or what I thought I learned, was that it would take an hour to focus on one person, and then to switch roles and have an hour doing the other person, and then a third session where we are looking at where our work intersects.
Right.
So perhaps we can do that.
Yeah, I remember that. So yeah, we should probably do that too. It's a little ambitious to expect we could do all of that in an hour or so. So maybe we should do the same.
Yes. And yeah, I'm just really inspired by all that you've done, and I see so much complementarity in what we think about and our goals and aims. And I'm really excited to go a bit deeper, Flemming.
I am too. Because actually it's maybe rare that we have an opportunity to do that, or most people don't sit still long enough, or don't stick around for something to come out of it. I mean, we might tell our story and then we move on and then we tell it again.
Yes.
Yeah. So no, I like that.
Yeah. And I also really value all of the learnings that you have in having done all the things that you've done, because there are those parts that, is it humans that are still trying to figure out how to listen to each other? Is it, egos that get in the way? Is it you know, and a part of what I've been thinking about and talking to some of my roommates and good friends about lately is just how much information we have to process. And especially given the state of the world today, as well as the state of our interaction and integration with technology, how information is really quite overwhelming. And that what does that do to our biology? And how can we include more of what other people are thinking so that we can build that capacity to open up our mental scapes and not have those kind of conflicty energies around this is what I think and that's the only thing that can be possibly thought, or whatever happens there, right?
Yeah, and I think we maybe need to get more of the sort of less neat pieces to our struggles and difficulties that normally wouldn't be the first thing we. It will be a while before we get around to that if people ask
Yes.
what we're doing, but it might be important to sort of understand who we are.
Yes.
Hmm.
The cat wants to join us. Here she is.
Hi, hi, Kat.
That's Chili.
Hi, Chili.
So, uh, just in terms of, I feel that we're probably coming to the end of our time. I'm sure you have other
Yeah.
things you're up for. So, just in terms of wrapping our session today, um, is there anything that you want to share as far as you know your burning ambition in kind of visioning a little bit into the future of what it is that you're looking for and what you might need to help to progress some of what you've shared and your life path?
Yeah. Nothing I can say very clearly, but there's also that. I mean, there are things I'm good at and things I'm not good at. Um, and I'm not good at asking for help, for example. But um, but part of the weaving would be to sort of find complementarities where we can work together on some of the things one of us is great at and the other one is not. Um, and there's nothing specific I have to ask for, but in terms of uh, like in the beginning, I talked about maybe the need for myself personally to have more of a structure around what I do, or more of uh, a system or a name, or so several levels to it, kind of thing. Um, which is maybe the thing I don't necessarily do. I don't know.
I've done a lot of work in that area.
Yeah, so 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 I might need to work with other people like you who does well some of the things I don't do. Um, and I mean, I'm not necessarily. I don't even necessarily know how to talk about it. I notice I get more sort of incoherent when I'm trying to express what I might need, kind of thing. So, um, um,
People to
I don't
work
know.
with.
But yeah,
Yeah,
but I mean,
I heard
anyway,
that.
yeah. So anyway, part of the purpose of the weaving should really be that we make that kind of connection. So,
Yes.
which might also be to clearly express like what are Fleming's needs? What is it that he needs that he's not doing? Who can do that? Um, how do we do that kind of thing? So um, I mean, we don't all have to do all of everything together, and part of this exercise is to find out how it works when we connect the pieces.
Yes.
Um, and yeah, and part of that might involve a bit of a process of sort of clarifying that. I notice I get a little confused even thinking about what I might need and what that might sound like.
So maybe I'll just share a little bit about where I feel from what you've shared that we've got really strong intersections. Certainly in talking to people and going deeper about who they are and what they bring. I see I see a broader need for us to figure out systems to be able to do that. And I feel that there's underneath what it is that you're saying in terms of movement building and in terms of responding to the needs of the world right now. I feel like there's some powerful work that we can do together in helping people to articulate that, and using what we've been learning in the conversation experiments and in our own work,
Yes.
to be able to kind of to shed light on that, to hold space for people to be able to share and to make connections with people. I feel like that's a really, I haven't quite figured out how to be compensated for that sort of work, but that's part of what I heard you say as well, is that it would be nice if this work that feels really important to us in connecting and in movement building could also be something that we could be compensated for and figure out those sorts of systems.
Yeah. So that that makes sense. So I mean, we both want some of the same things, helping people articulate what's their thing, make some things clear, or be okay with some things that are not clear, but certainly being more comfortable in that space. And yes, if there are ways we could figure out how some of that can be compensated, doesn't mean that people have to pay for all of what we're talking about here, but that there could be a side service where similar thing can be done for some people who should pay for it, kind of things.
And part of what I feel strongly about, and I guess one of my challenges in getting compensated for the work that I do is I want to create value first, Flemming, right? I want to create value first and then be compensated. So I'm looking for ways to be able to create value that people are like, yes, that was useful. And so I'm coming from a slightly different perspective than most people do when they're trying to do a business or whatever. I first want it to be a value and then figure out what the compensation is.
Yeah, well, we should maybe talk more about that too. So that, well, me too in a sense, but there are some settings where you do that so quickly that uh, whether they pay you before or after this hour of service doesn't really matter, because they will walk away with the result, kind of thing. So I mean,
Yeah.
it's, but I mean, I'm sort of similar. I don't feel good about, I don't want to charge money for something that's not really valuable. I'd like it to
Yes.
give a result first.
Yes.
Uh, but I also notice that sometimes that sort of makes me sabotage myself a little bit.
Right.
And sometimes it's harder to make people want to pay for it afterwards. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that's sometimes work. I do half of my economy for many years has been sort of gift economy, that people who
Yes.
decide it's probably time I pay you something.
Mm-hmm.
And I really like that. And at the same time, I notice that that's uh, it is less than it could be. I mean,
Yeah.
people are very nice, and at some point they'll decide they need to pay me something, but maybe they should have paid me twice as much if sort of we had talked about it a little more clearly. I don't
Right.
know.
Right.
Yeah. So I don't want to just wait around for people to decide that something is due in my direction. Although I really like the feeling of that,
Yes.
one can probably be more proactive about it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so
Well,
we can talk more about that. I mean, we probably
yes.
both have blind spots in that. Like,
Yes.
I find it all very distasteful. I don't want to
Yes.
like ask money for anybody, but I just wanted to sort of show up when I need it, and that both works and doesn't work. So there could be things to learn.
Cool. Okay. Well, Flemming, I think we've got a fantastic start, and I really love how our session went today.
Me,
Do you mind if we do a little checkout after this?
yes, no problem. Yes, let's do that.